Okay, so today we're going to talk about colors and color theory because I think it's really important that we have a conversation about color. Truth be told, you could very easily spend an entire semester delving into color theory. So this is a very cursory overview of colors, and some of it will be reminiscent of, say, kindergarten or first grade, where you got to play with finger paints and think about colors in that way. And some of it hopefully will be a little bit more advanced and will challenge your brain slightly more than that level. So fingers crossed that we get there today. I will also show a bunch of Charlie Harper examples. And as part of your exercise today, we're actually going to look for an example of Charlie Harper to kind of base your work on. So we'll talk through that as we get to the lecture or the lab part of the class. But before that, I want to talk about color theory. And we have to start very basic. And we'll start here with the color wheel. And with the color wheel, this is something you guys have seen before. Essentially, we've got our primary colors, which are our red, our blue, and our yellow. If we were to mix red and yellow paint together, we'd get orange. This is where I was talking about finger painting when you were in kindergarten or first grade. You learned this with various colors and how you mix them together. You mix yellow and green, or you mix yellow and blue together, you get green, which is a secondary color. Tertiary colors are mixing a primary color and a secondary color together. So you would get, like, let's say, light green or a yellow green or kind of a red-violet. You guys get the idea. Complementary colors are colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. So if we have a color wheel and we draw a line directly across, say we start at yellow and we draw a line directly across, the complementary color to yellow would be purple. Likewise, if we had red, the complementary color would be green. And so we can figure out what that complementary color would be, and that's a good way of finding a color that is complementary. Analogous colors, on the other hand, are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. So these are similar shades, just slight variants on the same basic color. So they're close to each other, not opposite. Usually they match each other well, but don't provide that much pop or that much contrast or that much attention or focus on a particular color. Color systems. So this is how colors are represented in our world. We have two different systems, and I mentioned this briefly last class when we were creating our logo, and I said to pick either a CMYK or an RGB color. This is what I'm talking about. So there's two color systems, and it's one of those things that's a little bit difficult to demonstrate or to talk about. But essentially, we have an additive color system and we have a subtractive color system. So in this case, an RGB color system, it's meant to be, it's created when we're using light. It's a light source. And so things like screens of our phones, computer monitors, projectors, TVs, those are light color systems. They're provided with light. So if we have three different colors of light, if we have a red light, we have a green light, and we have a blue light, and we turn on all three of those colors at the same time, we will end up with white. If we if we just turn on the red light and the green light, we'd end up with yellow. If we just turn on the red light and the blue light, we'd end up with magenta. So you can kind of see how this works. So this is with active light sources. So any kind of a screen, monitor, etc. is going to be in an RGB color system. So when we talk about in Illustrator, we're doing a project, if we think about the end product, if it's going to be something that's displayed on the web, if it's going to be something basically in non-printed form, if it's going to be in digital form, then it should be in an RGB color space, because that's the most accurate color representation, because that's how our monitors, that's how our phones display. It doesn't mean that you can't switch back and forth between. The challenge is when you switch back and forth between, to the next one, which I'll show you in a second, when you switch back and forth, the colors can be slightly off from each other. So if we're looking at it in an RGB color space, we should be able to precisely predict what that color is going to be. The opposite is the CMYK color space. And this comes, it's a different strategy here. This is printed things. These are things on paper. And the way that this works is if I were to put cyan toner or paint or something on a particular surface, what that paint is doing is it's absorbing all the other colors of light and just reflecting back to me the cyan color. So if I were to paint the cyan color and the magenta color together, the only thing that would be reflecting back to me is blue. If I were to paint the cyan, the magenta, and the yellow together, theoretically, I'd get black. The truth is that it's not quite black, and so that's where the K comes in, which is actual black. So we use actual black to substitute for that. It's just a little bit easier. But essentially, cyan and yellow together would end up making green. Yellow and magenta together would end up making red. So the easiest way of thinking of this is the colors of the toner in a laser printer. So typically, a laser printer has these colors in it. It has the cyan, the magenta, the yellow, and the key, which is black, as our primary four toners, and we can make any color out of those in this color space. So if you're going to be printing the final document, if you're making a portfolio and the intended purpose is to print it, you're making a poster and the intended purpose is to print it, you should be working in the CMYK color space, because that's the most accurate representation of the colors that you're going to be creating. So let's move into color theory itself. And the idea here is that there is meaning behind the colors that you choose to use. And you, as a designer, need to be conscious, need to be aware of what those colors mean and why you might choose a particular color. So you don't just choose pink, as my daughter would at 7.5, because she likes the color pink. You think about what the connotations of the color pink are, and why or why not you might think it's appropriate on your architecture project or your design project to use the color pink. You want to be deliberate when choosing those colors and make sure that the color you're choosing has the desired effect or has the desired meaning behind it. Color theory is at its core about developing aesthetically pleasing color relationships. So we want to think generally about emotions. There are generally color groups that evoke certain emotions, and we can work within those groups if we have a general idea of what we're trying to do. We can refer to these generally as warm, cool, and neutral color groups. So the warm colors are the reds, the yellows, and the oranges, essentially the colors that you tend to see in a fire. Those colors tend to be warm. They tend to be kind of happy colors, joyful colors, etc. In 2009, there was a bunch of struggling websites, and they shifted their color schemes over to yellow to make people happy. I know it sounds ridiculous. This stuff happens. I'm going to show you examples of this. Okay? So little subtle things designers can do to change your general perception. Blue, green, purple, those are generally the cool colors. They can be cold, but they also are generally used in a very professional setting. So if we want to present ourselves or our company in a very professional manner, we're generally going to work within the cool color groups. It's not always the case, but it can exude a certain amount of professionalism. The neutral colors, the grays, the browns, the blacks, the whites, generally aren't swayed either way, though you could have a warm gray or a cool gray, for example. So a slight tint to one of the grays, and that could be subtly going in a certain direction, but it's not as obvious. So these tend to be the neutral colors. So let's talk about each of the main colors first. Red, generally symbolic of fire and power associated with passion. Stimulates energy, excitement. There's a reason that we like to paint front doors red. It's a very bold, exciting color. Come to my house. Negative connotations, anger, emergency, rage, frustration, those kinds of things can be bottled up in red as well. So you want to be aware that on every one of these colors, there's usually a flip side. So red might be about passion, but it also might have a little bit of a negative connotation of anger. So you want to be aware that it can work both ways. Orange, very similar. It's still in the warm color tones. It's generally associated with happiness, joy, sunshine, fire, warmth. You get the idea. Evokes a childlike exuberance, potentially. Negative connotations, it's still a little bit on the aggressive side. Can be symbolic of ignorance or deceit. Yellow is generally the happy color. The easiest way of thinking of this is going back to, I can always use my daughter as the example, or I guess my son in this case. When they draw a picture, they draw the sun. It's always bright yellow. It's a happy color. So we just make that sun in the corner of the page because it's a happy color. Joy, intelligence, brightness, energy, optimism, excitement, those kinds of things come with yellow. Negative feelings could be caution. Generally, we use yellow for caution. Actually, a while back, you can't see it anymore, but or you can barely see it. The grate in the center of the courtyard out there, they randomly one day decided that that was a trip hazard or some kind of a hazard, and they came out with bright yellow paint, and they painted around each of those little grate drains. I guess somebody could get their feet caught in them or whatever. It was absolutely awful when they first did it. It's faded and doesn't look nearly as bad now, but it certainly drew attention to it. It certainly highlighted the fact that there's a grate here. Don't you dare step on it, because you might trip. We do the same thing at the edges of stairs. Oh, guess what? There's a stair. There's yellow caution tape. Right? You put caution tape around things because you don't want somebody to go in that area. So it certainly has that effect as well. You don't see caution tape and get excited and joyful. Right? It's the opposite effect. But it's important to realize that those things are relevant when it comes to colors. Green is generally symbolic of nature or healing qualities, no surprise. It's also symbolic of money. Because of that, the negative connotations would be greed. So you can, again, have it both ways. Can be used to show a beginner, somebody that's new at something. And that has to do with the growth part of it. So it's a different color, different connotations. Blue. Blue is essentially the peaceful and calming color. It's stability. It's expertise. And that's usually how it's used. Symbolics of trust and dependability. We're always going to be here. That's why companies like it. Negative, it's a little bit on the cold side, maybe depressing. So I like to throw up examples occasionally. So this is an older example. I have a refresh of this in 2 slides. This is the White House website, whitehouse.gov. Take just kind of a look at this. It doesn't matter what it says, but just to kind of take a look at it. Seems pretty stable. Seems like, yes, this is an institution. OK, I buy that. Now, what if I change the same website to be red? It has a different feel. It's not the same. And so sometimes when you look at these sorts of things, it's important to be aware that your choice can make a difference on people's impressions. So let's look at it now. Same website, just another example. I try to update it for a more current website. OK, this is what it looks like. Pretty stable. Seems like they know what they're doing, maybe. At least that's what they're trying to say. What if we switch it to red? Feels different. So it's something to be aware of, something to be conscious of. Make sure you make those decisions consciously. So purple is generally the color of royalty or sophistication. That was because way back when dyes were really expensive, if you wanted to have clothes that were a certain color, purple dye was the most expensive. So you had to be wealthy, you had to be royal in order to afford the dye to dye your clothes purple. So there's that connotation still exists, though. Even though, of course, we can all afford purple clothes now, it's something to be aware of, that historical connotation pulls itself through into where we are today, and we still have a little bit of that belief. It can be spiritual, can have something to do with spirituality, associated with healing and or the feminine qualities. It can be a little bit gloomy or sad. Black is generally correlated with power, elegance, sophistication. There's a reason that architects love to wear black. I happen to wear black today. That was not intentional. I just grabbed it out of my closet this morning. There's a reason that we do that. It's a certain way of focusing attention on our work, not on ourselves. And it's a neutral place to be. And so we typically use that. It's actually really funny. You have a review, and everybody that comes in will be wearing black. It's like part of the architect wardrobe or something. I know, it's unspoken rules. It can be associated, however, with death. It's the color of mourning. Somebody dies, you wear black. Architecture, we wear black. Does that mean our project dies? I don't know. So it's just something to be aware of. It's the color of grief, mourning, and sorrow. So certainly be aware of that negative association. White, symbolic of purity or innocence, shows a cleanliness or a safety. It can also be cold and distant. Snow, think snow. Winter's harsh qualities. So here we go. This is interesting. Research reveals that human beings make an unconscious judgment about a person, environment, or item within 90 seconds of initially viewing whatever that item is. Between 62 and 90% of that initial assessment is based on color. That's pretty crazy. So when you look at something, and this isn't the case for everything, but for most things, when you look at it, your initial impression of something takes only 90 seconds, and a large part of that is based on the color. Color's important. Now, I have to make one caveat here, and that is that today I'm going to make it seem like color is the most important thing in the entire world. Okay, that's not the case. Designers don't sit around all the time thinking about, what does it mean? I'm Harley Davidson. What does it mean when I make my logo orange? And am I really making sure I pick the right color? Should it be pink instead? No, they don't sit around and do that. Sometimes they like the color. And that's certainly an acceptable way of doing it. But I want you to be aware that this stuff matters, and that's why I emphasize it so much. So the color emotion guide, we just spent all last class talking about logos and thinking about logos. You designed your logo. You picked a color for your logo, potentially. Maybe your opinion of that color changes today. But I think it's interesting to look at these various circles and how those various companies fall into those categories, and which ones tend to fall in which category. So, for example, if we looked at the blue color section here, right, I would say almost all the colors in this blue color section are all about stability. AT&T, Lowe's, American Express, GE, HP, big, stable companies. And then we work our way out, right? I think the purple ones are kind of interesting. And then we work our way out. Orange, for example, if you look through that orange set, it's kind of interesting which companies choose to be orange, which companies choose to be green. And then you've got the outliers. You've got the Googles of the bunch that are like, we just are going to make every color and use that. eBay, etc. So it's an interesting way of looking at it. So let's look at a few case studies. These hopefully will be fun for you. Okay, so let's go way back in time. 1996. Anybody not born in 1996? This is crazy. I'm so old. So believe it or not, I was born in 1996. I wasn't born in 1996, but I was alive in 1996. Actually, I was about to go into high school. There you go. So this is what Yahoo looked like in 1996. This is like the early days of the internet, like when you had to dial in and it took forever to have this page load. And so this is what Yahoo did. So a couple things that we want to point out relating to this first ever Yahoo page. The Yahoo logo, it might not be the first ever, but it's early on in the Yahoo career. The Yahoo logo is red. Remember, the internet was a new and exciting thing. So let's make our logo red. Let's get somebody excited about it. Let's get them to come to this page in the first place. Then we move forward to the year 2000. So I jumped 4 years ahead. This was in that first .com bubble where things were starting to be online. And notice all of the Yahoo logo still red. But notice the green on the page and the big bar for Yahoo Shopping and the idea that you could buy something online and have it shipped to you, which seems like such an obvious thing now. But at that time, it was like a relatively new thing. Like if you wanted to buy something in the year 2000, you generally went to the store and bought it. You wanted a computer, you had to go to a computer store. It's different. So the idea that you could order something online, thousands of stores, millions of products. Right now we have Amazon with billions of products. You know, things change. Emphasis on shopping, emphasis on money. We switch over and show that green as a highlight color. We move forward to 2003. We see our first little bit of purple on the Yahoo page. Little bit of purple. Again, kind of chaos on the page. Yahoo logo is still red, still trying to drive that excitement. And we have a little bit of blue, the personal assistant. I wonder how personal assistant that was. We move forward into 2005. We see that purple coming up there. Yahoo logo is still red. This particular page was near Valentine's Day, so we have the pink The pinkish red color showing up because of the association with Valentine's Day, buy your flowers, etc. 2007, Yahoo said, yeah, we kind of like what Google's doing. They're kind of good, maybe. So let's strip down our page and let's clean it up a little bit. Yahoo logo still red. Web search button is in yellow. Search here. No, we didn't like being like Google. We're going to go back to being Yahoo. Major rebranding, 2009, Yahoo logo switches from red to purple. So they wanted to try to keep their customers rather than get new excited people to come to Yahoo. So they were trying to rebrand themselves as, hey, guess what? We're been around for a long time. We're a stable company. And furthermore, we're kind of the high-end email client. So come to us. We're going to rebrand ourselves as purple. You're seeing a lot more purple showing up on the page. We move forward, lots more purple. So from here on out, we're in 2013 now, and we're moving forward, lots of purple. I love this, the rare sea creature found off the coast of California. I just thought it was really funny, so I had to throw that one on there. Anyway, so you're seeing a lot more purple showing up on that particular page. As we jump forward, 2016, the purple gets a little bit darker, okay? But generally, the purple's still there. And there's a lot of purple on that particular page. Move forward again. 2017 looks very similar, though the Yahoo search bar has turned more blue. I'm not quite sure what the goal was behind that. And there we are as of this morning, what Yahoo looked like. So that was the transgression or the progression of Yahoo from 1996 to now. So I couldn't resist. I had to show another one. 1997, Apple. Does this look at all like Apple now? It's kind of like that first Apple logo, right, that I showed you guys last class. It's interesting. But let's look at the colors. So again, first website for, I gotta love this, pre-order Mac OS 8. Sweet. But look at all the red on the page. Right? Hey, we're an exciting company. Let's make this red, and let's look at it. That was 1997. That was right about when Apple was ready to die. So you guys know that Apple was like on its deathbed, was about to go under, was about to go bankrupt, and Steve Jobs came back to the company and said, we're going to fix it. And look at where Apple is today. So Apple, 1998. So I showed 1997, what Apple was before, and we switch over. Steve Jobs comes back into Apple Computer. At that point, it was Apple Computer, not Apple. And major redesign of everything. Major redesign of the computers. See, this is like ancient history. If you guys weren't even born, you have no idea what a big deal this computer was. Like, it looks so cool compared to regular computers. Like, it was a big deal. So here we are, Apple. Check out the laptop. Gotta love the laptop there. So this is 1998, stripping out a lot of the color. And again, that's kind of important. So we went from having color. This page, we strip out most of the color. Remember, they're trying to rebrand themselves as a new company. We're a stable company. We want you to feel comfortable with us. Furthermore, our new product, our new iMac here, is the coolest thing you've ever seen. And they had it in like 4 colors. They had it in orange, they had it in like kind of a green color, and they had it in purple. They chose to put purple on the website because it's a higher end, it's an exotic product. Right? It's the product of royalty. It's something new, it's something you want. Yeah?
I've never seen a red Apple logo before. I think that's interesting for the pop-up.
Well, that's a holdover from a couple, this was 2000. They kept the red Apple logo from back to here, the red. And so there's a little bit of a holdover. I don't think it's here. No, they haven't converted it over yet. It's still the rainbow, and then we get the red Apple logo. So I think that it's just how these companies decide to make decisions like this. It wasn't like it was some dude just randomly sitting in there saying, I'm going to make the Apple logo red today. This was conscious, especially with Steve Jobs around, because you know he loved to fire people over things like, you made the Apple logo red, get the hell out. So something like that was a conscious decision. So then we move forward a little bit. Apple logo changes to blue. We're now a stable company, 2001. We've come back from our bankruptcy, or almost bankruptcy. We're a good company. Adobe Illustrator 10. Gotta love it. And Star Wars Episode 2. There you go. There you go. Puts things in perspective. I love this. This is 2002. 1 gigahertz with SuperDrive. Yeah, baby. Notice, though, holiday gift guide in green. Click here and spend your money. So little things about color. But again, awful lot of blue on this page. Apple logo switched from red to blue. Now it's gray. So we're seeing that progression. 2004. Anybody remember these ads? This was huge. Huge. The idea of the big, iPod. It was the first music player that was actually like this luxury item. I mean, I remember when I saw the first ever iPod. Like, I had a friend who got an iPod, and it was like, that is so awesome. Like, we used to carry around like the disc players and the really chunky headphones and whatever. It's like, no way, it all fits on that little thing that was like a big brick, Really? That's crazy. And so they did a brilliant job of how they chose to market this with these color backgrounds. Notice the big purple. This is a luxury item again. It's a new, cool thing. You want to have it. But they also did a great thing, and I don't know whether anybody really noticed this, but Apple made all their headphones white. Before Apple, all the headphones were black or gray or whatever. Apple made their headphones white because when you wore your white headphones, right? When you wear your white headphones, you're subtly saying, I have an Apple device because my headphones are white. So they basically took the white headphone as an advertisement for everybody, and then they emphasized it in all of these commercials. So in that case, it's the absence of color, but it's still important. It was still a color decision. They could have done it with green headphones. White happened to go with everything. So then we go forward, 2006. Apple was trying to become this, like, hey, we're into production. We can do high-end video. You should work with us on this. And so here's our Mac Pro. Big, stable company. No color on the page whatsoever. Then we move forward to 2007. From this point on, a lot of the color is emphasizing the computers and what the computers can do, or the iPhones and what the iPhones can do. The iPhone's not there yet. And so a lot of the color is going to show up. Most of the color for Apple itself has gone away. And it's just the devices themselves that have the color on them from now. How about this in 2010? Check that out for an iPhone. I think they've come a long way. Voice control. That was before Siri. Then we move forward. MacBook Air 2011. Again, color is emphasized on the devices, not so much on the page itself anymore. At this point, we're really shifting between subtle shades of gray. Right at the top, we have that color gray. We move forward a little bit. It's a little bit darker, a little bit more shine to it. So it's subtle iterations at this point. A little bit darker still in 2013. So this was a big deal. And you guys are like, this is ancient history. Why is he even mentioning this? So in 2013, Johnny Ives decided that all the UI for Apple products was going to switch from being shiny and rounded with shadows to being flat with no shadows. And he was the one who basically changed the course of web design, graphic design, because of his decision to do it on Apple. So he was in a position to where he had enough devices out there to where when he said, this is how Apple's going forward, all the rest of the companies said, oh, we got to do the same thing because Apple's cool and we want to be like Apple. And it really changed the whole web design interface or UI design at that point. So I think it's important to kind of highlight that. Interesting, in 2014, Apple changed their website a bit. We got a lot of big color images. That bar is still kind of that shiny, which I think is also interesting because that didn't go away yet, even though all the rest of the shine went away. Now the shine's gone away in 2015. Still that gray bar, again, color emphasized on the products themselves. Gray bar getting darker. Notice it's been getting darker every year. We're now at almost black in 2016. 2017, I think it actually made it to black, or very, very dark gray, maybe 90%. And 2018, the whole website went black. So it's just kind of interesting to see that progression. So for me, seeing those kinds of things is a useful way of kind of seeing how history has changed. These, by the way, you can do this on any website that you want. There's an internet archive. It's archive.org/web. They call it their Wayback Machine. And you can put in any website. You can even put in the digital tool site. It doesn't go back that far, but you can see what the old version of the site looked like. Basically, anything that you can think of, any website, you can go back and see what it looked like back in the infancy days when they first had their website. It's a pretty cool website. It's a bit slow, but you can do it and you can see it. That's where I got all of these images. There are other color websites that we'll talk about today. Paladin, Colored, and colorlovers.com are all different color choice websites that you can find color palettes and that sort of thing on, and we'll discuss those today. So let's take a quick break and then switch into our Charlie Harper stuff. And so we're going to pause on color theory. I'll come back to color theory when we get into the lab portion, but I want to show you some examples for assignment 104 and talk about Charlie Harper. Charlie Harper was an artist in the 50s and 60s, and he did a lot of basic animal shapes. And they were all paintings at that point. He didn't have Adobe Illustrator to do his paintings. And these were the kinds of paintings that they did. They were abstract. They took animals and they distilled those animals down into really basic shapes. A lot of patterns and how the patterns come together. Those basic shapes then became the artwork. A lot of repetition thematically. And so you guys, for your assignment 104, are going to be doing something like this. Whenever things move, he tends to show them in outline form. You can see the wings of the hummingbird here are outlined. But notice there's no perspective. There's layers, something in front of something else, but there's no three-dimensionality to any of these shapes. They're flattened out into their most basic form. He also did this a lot, where he had a background pattern, say here all the circles, but then one of the circles becomes the bird's head. Notice that this is nicely kind of oriented rule of thirds. So he's using those same principles in terms of how he's organizing his composition. Another example here of the ladybugs interacting, very geometric shapes. So one of the things when I first started assigning this that people would do is they'd go online and they'd find an image of some ladybugs, and then they'd like trace over it or try to draw the ladybug, and they always ended up being three-dimensional. And it's really important that you understand that he's taking the idea of a ladybug and making it into a very simple shape. That's basically a U turned sideways. That's it, with a half circle. So there's not too much to it, which makes it perfect for what we're doing in Illustrator. So there we are, November 1954. I think this one is particularly nicely done because of the way that the layering has been set up in it. So we have the dragonfly flying above. That's the highest most item. Then we have the plane of the water represented by the concentric rings. The leaf is sitting on that plane. Then below that we have the lily pads. Below that we have the fish, I guess, and or the snake. Below that we have the fish, the big fish. And then at the very bottom we have the crawdad, or the crayfish at the bottom. So it's just by layering that we're getting the perspective, not because they're actually set back in perspective. Sorry, that one's a bit blurry. So is that. So let's look at some student work. And I don't have too many slides. You guys can look at student work on the course website too as well. But these are all in the same general pattern or idea of a Charlie Harper. There's a lot that are adaptations of his work, and I think that's what I'm going to encourage you guys to do. You can create something entirely your own, but if you make an adaptation of his work, this is an adaptation of his work, a lot of times that's a good place to start. You can use that as a guide and then tweak it and make it your own. And so this, for example, could be a Charlie Harper. It looks very, very similar to a Charlie Harper, but it is, in fact, student work. But it's using the same general idea compositionally setting it up slightly differently. I thought this one was nicely done with the termites losing their wings. Another good adaptation. Same general idea, but then tweaking it and making it your own. Very geometric in the shapes here. Could the flamingo's neck really do that? No. But geometrically it works because of the overlapping circles. So that's something to be aware of. And then I have to show this one because I've always really liked it. It's a little too 3D for Charlie Harper, but somehow the repetition and the pattern was just really nicely done. And so I like to show that one as well. Okay, so in terms of today, I'm going to switch over and we're going to talk about getting your color palettes and that sort of thing. But the first part of your exercise today, under part 1, you're going to actually go find a sample Charlie Harper image. And so you can be working on this while I switch over to start recording on the next the school computer. But what I want you to do is find a Charlie Harper image that you like, that you think you can adapt to your own work. So find something that looks interesting, and then you're going to be making a post with that so that we know where you're kind of going. Does it mean that you're locked in and you have to do that? If you start working on it and you don't like it and you want to scrap it, no, you can totally do that. That's fine. You can scrap the idea. But I want you to start someplace because I think you're going to get far better results. You're going to make a post for that. You do not need to comment on that post. And guess what? The second post that you're going to make, you don't need to comment on that either. So you get a free day of comments. No comments today. So it's a good day. OK, so I'm going to switch over, and then we'll talk about color palettes. OK, so we're going to keep going with the color swatches. And you guys can be browsing for the Charlie Harpers and post those a little bit later. But when we start talking about color swatches, I'm going to show you some websites that can help you, assuming that the websites work. This is the case with all internet stuff. It doesn't always work when you want it to. But these websites are designed to help you figure out color palettes. And so the first website, I went ahead and I logged into our site. I'm looking at exercise 115, which is our class exercise for today. And the first website I'm going to use is a website called Paleton. And this website, they call it the color theme designer or the color scheme designer. And what it does is it generates color palettes for you. And so in this first example here, and obviously there's ads and whatever because they have to support their site as well. But ignore those and look at this main window here. And they have several different styles of picking your color. And so the first one here is called monochromatic. It's one color. And what it does is it allows us to swing the color through the color wheel. And so, for example, I could pick orange, or I could pick red, or a purple, or a blue, or whatever. And when I stop on that particular color, it's going to give me the primary color, and then it's going to give me variants that are analogous. So it's the same tone of color, but it's slightly lighter and slightly darker. So I go from the dark to the medium to my color to light and lighter. If I'm unhappy with the color distribution, I can click this and spread it to get even darker. So in this case, I'm all the way out at the extreme, so I get a white and a black, and then I'm basically just getting 3 colors. But I can also make them much tighter so that the colors are almost the same color. And so kind of a happy medium somewhere in there is probably pretty good. And again, you can swing through and change the color itself. We can then move into what they call adjacent colors, which is also kind of analogous colors. And in here, you're picking your primary color. So if my primary color was blue, for example, I will get blue with the variants of blue, but I'll also get an analogous that's purple and an analogous that's kind of a teal shade. If I were to move this up over into red, for example, I'd get the red, I'd get kind of a gold and kind of a purple. And so this is giving me basically analogous colors. This next one, they call it the triad or the 3-color. I think it's easier to call it split complementary because essentially you have your primary color in red, and instead of having the direct opposite here, complementary color being green, you instead have over here, you have kind of a split. You have a slightly lighter green and a slightly lighter blue, which gives you the red and a blue and a green that go with it, essentially. I like this in terms of rounding out a nice comprehensive color palette because generally, as you swing through, you can get a primary color that you like and two complementary colors that work pretty well with it. And so this, to me, is kind of the best of what this site can offer in terms of figuring out your color schemes. The next one here is called a tetrad, and it's essentially two complementary colors that are, we have two analogous colors and their complements, which are also analogous. And so you can move this around and pick your first one, for example. There, I get red, I get my direct complement across, green. I get an analogous color, orange, and I get its direct complement, which is that blue. And then the final one here is freestyle. You can essentially pick your own colors. I don't recommend working with freestyle. I would pick one of these first set of options. And so if I went back to that split complementary here, and I swung around into, say, the blue zone, let's pick that one. I'm getting the blue, and I'm getting my complementaries, or my split complementaries. Once I have this color palette the way I want it, once I've decided that, yeah, this is the color palette I like, I would like to find a way of saving it. And so if I move down here to this button that called Tables and Export, it's going to give me my primary color with my different shades and my secondary and secondary color number 2. I can create this color in Illustrator, InDesign, or Photoshop using these RGB color values right there. So 112, 155, and 157. It would be really annoying to have to go in and write all these values down and then recreate them. True? So I have 15 different colors here, and that would be more challenging. So I could do it. The other thing that I have is I have what are called the hex values. These are web values of the color. So I could write down those numbers and create the color based on that. If I continue over here, though, I have something called color swatches. And when I click color swatches, I can download it here. The only one that's really particularly useful is the Photoshop swatch. So since I can download in Photoshop, let's go ahead and do that. I'll click on the ACO Photoshop, and it's going to download a mypalette.aco. This color swatch is unique to just Photoshop. And I wish that this website, instead of doing a Photoshop, did a swatch exchange file, which is the universal one that goes between all the Adobe products. But for whatever reason, this website doesn't do that. So we have to take a few extra steps to get it into that Adobe swatch exchange file. This is, by the way, written out right here on this Photoshop 1.23 color swatches. So if you get lost, you can go back and look at it there. And it'll walk you through all the same stuff that I'm doing right now. There it is. So I've downloaded that mypalette.aco. At this point, I need to open Photoshop. It's a Photoshop file. I'm going to have to open Photoshop to work with it. So I'll double click on Photoshop and get that one to open. Maybe. There we go. OK, and with Photoshop open, I don't actually have any document open. And that's OK. I don't need a document open to work with this color palette. I'm going to go up to the File menu, and I'm going to go down. Sorry, it's in the Edit menu. I'm going to go down to Presets, and then Preset Manager. So it's Edit, Presets, Preset Manager. And it's going to bring up the Photoshop Preset Manager. The preset type here is currently listed as brushes. Well, I don't want brushes. I actually want swatches, which are color. So I've changed my preset type to swatches. And at this point, I'll make a note of what the last color, these are the default colors that are in Photoshop. It ends with this brown color here. I can click the Load button, and I can go find that color set of swatches that I just downloaded. So where's my downloadeds? There's my mypalette.aco file. I'll go ahead and click on Load. And starting at that brown, I'll get all of the colors that I just created on this website. So there's all the colors. So I didn't have to write any of the values down, which is the important thing here. And they're loaded right here into Photoshop. At this point, of course, I could click Done and start using them in Photoshop. But I don't want to use them just exclusively in Photoshop. I want to be able to bring them between InDesign, Illustrator, and Photoshop. So I'm going to click on the first swatch here, so it's highlighted. I'm going to move all the way to the last swatch right there. I'll hold down Shift, and I'll click the last swatch. It's going to select all of the swatches in that group, all 15 of them. It would be logical at this point to go to Save Set. However, that just saves another Photoshop swatch set. Adobe's brilliance here, right? So instead, I want you to go to this little gear icon up here at the top, that little tiny gear icon with a little arrow next to it. And when you do that, you can choose Save Swatches for Exchange. That's what I want. And when I click Save Swatches for Exchange, you'll notice that Save As type is called a .ase file. This is the Adobe Swatch Exchange file, and it's usable in Photoshop, InDesign, and Illustrator, which is ultimately what we want. Okay? So we'll use this. Well, I can call it My Palette again, but it's called .ase this time. And I'll go ahead and save it. So I can click Done, and I can actually close out Photoshop altogether. So now that I have that .ase file, I could open Adobe Illustrator, for example, and I can load it in. The way that we're going to work with swatches today, I have some sample files to make your life easier. And they're listed right here. So under Part 4, this is so that we can confirm that our swatches are working. You're going to pick the sample file. This is an Adobe Illustrator file that matches up with the number of swatches that you're going to be working with. The one that I did has 15 colors, so I'll pick the sample that has 15 colors. It'll download the Color Swatch 15 file, and I can then open that up in Illustrator. And there we are. All this is a bunch of individual squares that I can apply colors to. That's it. You could create this on your own, but I'm trying to save you the work. So now that I'm in Illustrator, and this is your first day of kind of going between Adobe programs back and forth too, I want to see the swatches. So I'm going to go to Window, and I'm going to choose Swatches. So that's Window and then Swatches. It brings up my swatches. I can actually make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to go to this little flyout menu, the icon with the 4 horizontal lines. And I'm going to go to Open Swatch Library, Other Library. You see that Illustrator has a bunch of swatch libraries that are already built in. But I'm going to open Other Library. And I'm going to go find that swatch that I created. It's the mypalette.ase. There you go. And I'll go ahead and say Open. And it's going to open it right here and give me all of those colors. So now our life gets really easy. I click the first shape. Oh, these are grouped together on the first one. I apologize for that. Right click and say Ungroup. And then you can select it individually. Alternatively, you could use the direct select to just select it that way. There it is. I'll click on the first color. Second one, click on the second color. Third one, click on the third color. You get the idea. And I'll apply those. Then I'll move on to the next set. And I'll do the last set here. And 5. This then confirms that I was able to work with the swatch file and that I was able to load that set of swatches. And that's the purpose of today. The idea behind swatches, though, is that once you develop a color palette that you like or that you want to use, you can reload that color palette over and over again. So if, for example, you were a designer and you were working for a client, and that client produced a variety of documents, say Diablo Valley College, for example, the color of green that DVC uses is a specific green. And so if you were doing product design or graphic design for DVC, you would need to know what color that green is. And the idea behind a swatch is that all you have to do is go find that swatch, click on it, and it will be that exact color green every time. And so it's something that you can reuse over and over again. So your second part of the post today is going to be, after you've created this Illustrator file, you're going to save this and post this. And I believe I want you to post your ASE file as well. So I'm going to show you a couple other websites that create swatches, just so that you can work with them as well. So let me go on to another website, colored.com, for example, COLRD. This is one of those websites that love to chop out all the vowels, so you have to try to remember how to spell it. And this colored website, if it's going to work for us, can be kind of cool. And I might end up having to switch this over into a different browser to have it work. There are a bunch of example color palettes, but the real power behind this is that you can click on the Create button in the upper corner here, and you can do something called Image DNA. And this is where you find something that you like, and then it will pull out key colors from that image and create a color palette of it. You can click on Open, and there are a bunch of sample images that you can work from. You're also supposed to be able to click on Upload and then choose an image. And I'm going to see if this is going to work for me. Let me go into my flash drive, and we'll pull an early sample image. There you go. It's working today. And so you can pull in any image, and then it'll build a color palette based on that image. It's kind of cool. Once you have this color palette set up here, you can click on the Save icon. And notice that we have download, Illustrator, Photoshop, and GIMP, which is the Photoshop variant. I'll try the Illustrator file. This one downloads as mycolor.ai, which is a direct Adobe Illustrator file. But in Illustrator, by the way, this was 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. So I need to go back to the 5 sample. There it is. There's my 5 colors. And I'm going to load that file that I just downloaded. So I'll go into Open Swatch Library, Other Library. It was in Downloads, and it was this one. And there's the My Color. There's the colors. I'll pick each one. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Just another way of generating a color palette. But it's also a good way if you have some kind of an image with an existing product in it that you want to derive colors from that particular image. So I like to show you that one as well. You can save the swatch exchange. I forget where it is. From Illustrator. You might have to add to the swatches and then do it from here. Save swatch library as ASE. You can do it that way too. But that one was easy because you could download it and go straight into Illustrator with it, as opposed to having to go into Photoshop to convert it to the swatch exchange and then go into Illustrator from there. So it's just a different website. So spend some time looking through that website because it can be an interesting strategy. The front page has a bunch of example images with their example color palettes that you can work from. So you can browse through that as well. So let me just make sure I've got everything here. OK, so I want to show you one other thing. And usually I show this next class, but I want you guys to have this today as a skill set because of where you're going with your Charlie Harper. And so let me create really quickly a document. There we go. And as you're creating your Charlie Harper, you're going to get to a point where generally people start with their shapes, and then they do their all in outline form. Sorry, I'm just really quickly building a Charlie Harper. It's a really fat bird. Sorry, bear with me for just a second longer here. Oops. Okay, so let's say that I had this as my really fat bird. And once I had this, I wanted to be able to fill in some of the various regions. So I had this as set up as an outline. And since this is such a common request, I wanted to show you guys. So I'm going to use something called the Live Paint tools to do this. And it's going to allow me to fill in these various regions really easily. The challenge with Live Paint is always that when you perform a live paint, you can end up messing up with lines. So I always recommend before you do it to open the Layers window. So I'll go to Window and then Layers. There it is. And with the Layers window open, I'm going to duplicate this layer. So I'll click the little flyout menu and I'll say Duplicate Layer 1. It gives me a Layer 1 copy and a Layer 1. I'll turn off my regular Layer 1. On the Layer 1 copy, I'm going to rename it to be Live Paint. And this will help protect you down the road because you haven't lost anything. You can always go back. You can trash the layer if something goes wrong. So I've turned off Layer 1. I have just the Live Paint layer on. I will select all of my objects. It's important that you select them all at once. Once they're selected, I'll go up to the Edit menu, or excuse me, the Object menu. I'll go to Live Paint and then Make. And you'll see that my group, the icons around my group will change. Right? It warns me visual appearances are going to go away. Yeah, that's fine. Again, that's why you make a copy of the layer just in case. And you notice that there's these little symbols that have shown up around the outside of my whole group. This then is a Live Paint group. I can come over to the Live Paint tool brush, which is hidden underneath what's called the Shape Builder tool. If I click and hold on that, it's the two circles with the dotted line in it. I can move down to the Live Paint Bucket tool, or I could press K on the keyboard to get there. And with that selected, I can select a fill color. I could also pick from my swatches, for example, like that. And you'll see that it will highlight all of the little shapes that I could fill in. So I could fill, for example, this in. And then I could switch and say, fill those in. And I could fill these in. And I could also choose to maybe fill in parts of these. You get the idea. So it's a way of filling particular regions that are not individual closed objects. That's enough just to pick the colors and fill things in. The challenge here is that when I'm done, like this, oh, you know what? I really wanted there to be a beak. Well, that's a problem because it's not part of the same Live Paint group. So if I wanted to divide it, again, and I went to the pen tool, okay, so let's say, I don't know, I'm trying to decide how I want to draw the beak. Right? this automatically filled in because it's part of the shape, but maybe I wanted it, I don't know, I need it to be more complicated. Hold on. Let's say that I wanted this body to be striped. Sorry, I'm trying to think of something that will allow me to do it. Let's say I wanted this body to be striped. I could take my first line, copy, paste. I'm going to do large stripes. All right, we'll say like that. Notice that all of the lines that I drew were larger than the circle itself. I can also use my align tools here. So if I selected these objects, hold down Shift and select them all. I could go to Window and then Align. And this is where I could distribute those objects along the center to make the spacing even, so that I didn't have to figure that out. Now, I wanted to go back and I wanted to fill these in so that they were different colors. If I went back to my live paint, it would still only allow me to paint what I had set up before as a live paint group. So I would actually have to add these other objects to the live paint group. So I'd go back into Object, I'd go back to Live Paint, and I'd say Merge. I've selected them all, I go back and merge. Now they're part of the live paint group. I could go back to my live paint, and now these are all individual regions. So I could take my color here, and let me try to lighten it up a little bit. And then I can paint the other parts of it, for example. Yeah?
And then you just leave the lines that are like left over.
So, right. So here's the advantage to the live paint is that you can essentially leave the lines the way they are. You could select all of the lines, and you could say that those have no stroke associated with them, which make them all transparent, which leave you with just this. And then you could turn back on your original layer, move it on top of everything else, and then those lines are on top of the other. So there's the advantage. The other thing that you can do, and you don't have to, is that you can take your live paint group, and when you're done with the live paint, let me go back to the live paint bucket here. Under properties, under the quick actions here is something called expand. If you click the expand button, it will actually break the live paint group apart and give you control over all of the individual little color regions. You can use direct select, and you can pick any one of these color regions, and you could move those onto their own layer, for example. So you can create actual objects by releasing that whole live paint group. It's not something at this phase that I would recommend doing. I'd keep it all on the same piece, just change your colors. Down the road, I may show you examples where breaking it apart is useful. But the idea here is that having your colors on one layer and having your lines on top of those colors on the other layer is a good strategy for working through it. So anyway, not that this is the most attractive bird in the world, but I was trying to show you the strategy for how you fill in your particular work. Make sure you work with layers. If you have a background pattern or something, you're going to want to have separate layers for your object. And so that's available in the layers. You work on a given layer by clicking on it and making it the active layer in the layers palette. So next class, we're going to spend time talking about diagramming. We're going to do a lot more work with layers and also with brushes. So if you want to add some brushes, you'll be able to do that after next class to enhance the lines themselves. But for right now, I'm going to let you work. I want the color palette today. I want the Charlie Harper sample image as your 2 posts. You're making 2 posts for today's class. And the rest of the time, I'm going to give you to work on Charlie Harper, which I think you all could use. So yeah, you have almost 2 hours. So you should be able to get the swatches done. You should be able to find your Charlie Harper fairly quickly. Once you get those 2 things wrapped up, just start working on your actual Charlie Harper. Ben, did you have another question?
Yeah,
just the JPEG is fine. I think on here I probably say the JPEG and the ASE, but I'm okay if you just give me the JPEG. I just want proof that you were able to do it. All right. Any other global questions? No? Okay. I'll let you guys start.